The Mercurius GraphQL adapter for Fastify allows us to define our own custom queries and mutations. In this video, we'll learn how we can use it to extend the GraphQL API that's automatically generated by Platformatic DB. Here we have a basic Platformatic DB app. We have Platformatic installed as a dependency, we have our Platformatic DB config file, and we have a plugin here, which at the moment doesn't have any functionality in, but we'll be adding some in shortly. Let's take a look at the GraphQL schema that has been automatically generated by Platformatic DB. We can do this with the Platformatic CLI, and you can see it shows us all the types, inputs, mutations, and all the queries that represent the GraphQL API that Platformatic DB has generated for us. We can go ahead and use it by running the Platformatic DB server. And once that's started up, we can then click through and we can go through to the graphical web UI. So this is an IDE that allows us to actually explore the GraphQL API that Platformatic DB has generated for us. First of all, we're going to now go and make a query to get all the quotes. So these are movie quotes that are in our database. And you'll see how we get all the type hinting, and that's coming from the GraphQL schema. And we can then get back the ID. We're going to have the quote from the movie, who said it in the movie, and then we're going to actually also have likes, so people can like the quotes, and then we'll get back the name for each movie that the quote is associated with. So when we run this query here, we'll see that we get all the quotes and their related movies back from our GraphQL API. All of this is from the GraphQL API that's been automatically generated by Platformatic DB. We can extend this API in a plugin. So heading back into our editor, we can go into this Fastify plugin here, which we have set up in our Platformatic app, and we can actually then go and build in new GraphQL mutations and queries. Now, if we take a look in our browser here, we can see the documentation for Mercurius. This is the GraphQL adapter for Fastify. And this is what Platformatic DB is using to build up that GraphQL API for us. The nice thing is that this is actually available for us here inside our Fastify plugin as app.graphql. And so we can now go ahead and actually extend the GraphQL schema. And this allows us to go and add a mutation. In this case, we're going to add a mutation which will allow us to like quotes. So add or increment the actual likes on a specific quote. So this is all GraphQL schema syntax, and it's saying that we're going to have this mutation like quote. It's going to accept an ID, and that's required, and it will be an integer. Now, in order for this to actually do something, to have some behavior associated with it, we need to define a resolver. So we're going to now call that GraphQL object, and we're going to call the define resolvers method. And inside of that, we're going to specify what we want for this mutation like quote, and this is going to be this resolver function. And this must be an async function because we're going to be making some calls to our database in here, and it's going to accept that ID for the quote. Now we have that in place, we can actually go and define the actual resolver function. So one of the other things that we have available is the SQL mapper, and that's available on app.platformatic. So we've got here the SQL helper, and we have DB, which allows us to run some queries. Let's see how we can use them here. So we're going to use db.query, and then we're going to use the SQL helper, and that allows us to actually safely escape anything that's any kind of input inside of our query. So we're going to be updating the quotes table. We'll set the likes and increment it by 1, where the ID equals, and this will be the ID that we get passed through here. This one that's been passed into our resolver, which is passed into that GraphQL mutation like quote. And then we want to actually return the likes back. So then down here, we can actually say return, and we're going to say return result 0, and then we will be returning that likes value from this mutation. So here we're building on top of that functionality of everything that Platformatic DB has automatically set up for us. Now let's head over into our browser, into Graphical, and we can go ahead and actually use that mutation. So we're going to define a mutation here, which will be to like the Wizard of Oz quote. And we're going to do run like quote. Now you'll see here that there's no prompting. So what we actually need to do to get that updated GraphQL schema is to refetch. And now we should actually have a like quote. So that's available for us. And then we can actually just call it with ID 1. And that's the ID of this Wizard of Oz quote. And now if we run that query, so we're going to run like Wizard of Oz quote, and that mutation has actually run, and we can see that it's gone and incremented it by 1, and we can actually go and run it again, and we can see it's incremented to 2. Now if we go back and get all the quotes, we can see that the likes for that movie, The Wizard of Oz, have been incremented and added up to 2. So that was adding a mutation. Now we're going to go and add another thing to our GraphQL API, and that is a query. So we're going to go back up here, and we'll say we're going to extend and add a query, and that's going to be a top quotes query. So we want to get back the top rated quotes in our database, and that's going to return an array of quotes. Now again, similarly to what we did for the mutation, we're going to need to add a resolver, and this will be a query resolver for top quotes. So let's go ahead and add this handler function. It's a little bit simpler because it doesn't have any input to it. And we're going to here actually use the Platformatic SQL mapper, and here we're using our entities. So we've got that quote entity, and we can use that to find, and we're going to actually put a restriction here. We're going to say where the likes are greater than or equal to 3. So we're going to say any quotes that are greater than or equal to 3 likes are our top quotes, and that's what we're going to return back from this query resolver for top quotes. Now if we save that and we head back over into GraphQL, we can again refresh the schema to refetch it, copy this get all quotes, change it to get to top quotes, and change this here to get top quotes. We can run it here, and we'll see we've not got any quotes that actually have 3 or more. So let's go ahead and like that Wizard of Oz quote again. And then if we go back and hit top quotes, we'll see that that custom query we've added pulls back that top quote for us. We have the full power of the Mercurius GraphQL adapter available to us right inside our Platformatic apps.